Hi guys, it's Angie with Fun Endeavors Tie-Dye Lab. Let's experiment a little bit today. I'm going to compare a muck dye versus a rack dye, and I'm going to add the dye underneath the ice. That's what the DUI stands for. I've done this experiment before, but it's been a long time ago, and I'm going to use some colors this time that have really good color splits, so I'm hoping we're going to be able to see a difference between the two methods. I'm going to spiral the shirts like normal. I'm finding a place in the middle of the shirt where I'd like for the spiral to begin. Then I'm going to clamp on a pair of locking tweezers to that area and place a microwavable splatter guard over the top and begin to spiral the shirt. Once I have the shirt spiraled, I'm going to hold the folds in place with some rubber bands. For this experiment, I'm using two of the same kind of shirts in the same size. I'm using two Gildan Ultra Cotton t-shirts. They've both been pre-washed. I soaked them in the same soda ash solution, wrung them out at the same time, and I'm going to tie them back to back. So I'm trying to keep as many variables the same as possible. Okay, so that's the first shirt tied. I'm going to go ahead and tie the second shirt, and then I actually placed them aside for just about a day while I was tying some other shirts, and they were almost totally dry when I began applying the dye. They don't have to be, but like I said, I like to let you guys know what the condition of the shirt is when I apply the dye. It does make a difference sometimes if the shirt is wet, or if it's just barely damp, or if it's completely dry. To begin, I've taken one of my long racks, which I dye over, and I've placed it over the top of a long tub. These are plastic tubs which you put underneath your bed to store things in. I have links down below in the description for these and for lots of other tie-dye items that I use. On one end of the rack, I'm placing the shirt, which I'm going to rack dye. And I'm using a washable marker and dividing each one of the shirts into 6 areas. I'm making sure that I take each one of my lines down through the center of my spiral. That way all the colors are going to originate from that center portion. I've placed the other shirt down inside of a plastic tub, or I think they consider it a dishwashing tub, which I purchased from the Dollar Tree dollar store. I'm dividing that shirt the same way. Then I'm going to use my silicone cake molds to make myself an ice barrier around the shirt, which I'm going to rack dye. So I've attached the cake molds together. I'm wrapping them around the shirt. And then in this case, they ended really nicely where I could just attach them on the other end. If not, I usually use a wooden clothespin to hold them together. By the way, there's a link for these down below in the description too. I've placed both of the shirts on the same rack so that hopefully if they're side by side and I'm applying the dye at the same time, I get close to the same amount of dye on each shirt. In the first section, I'm going to apply elderberry from Dye Spin. And by the way, when I do comparison videos or experiment videos, my technique may be a little bit different than yours. So if you replicate the same exact experiment, your shirts are probably going to turn out a little bit different. You know, every tie-dyer has a little different way or method in which they tie-dye. That's the reason why every shirt looks so unique. So maybe you add a little bit more dye than I do or a little bit less dye than I do. That's going to make your shirt look a little bit different. Okay, in the next section, I'm going to use Wild Chicory from Dye Spin. All the colors that I'm going to use on this shirt are either Dye Spin colors or Happy Cat tie-dye colors. And if you haven't tried either one of those dye suppliers, they make some really cool colors. Dye Spin is a company out of Missouri, and they make gorgeous dye colors. And they're really good to mark the top of their jars with not only the dye name, but how to mix the dye if you're going to use it as a liquid. They also are constantly adding new colors. Happy Cat Tie-Dye is a small business, and Amanda, I think she's in New Jersey, is also constantly adding new colors, and she mixes her dyes specifically for ice dyeing, so they have lots of gorgeous color splits. A lot of the dye spin colors have gorgeous color splits too, and a lot of times they put not only a liquid dyed swatch, but an ice dyed swatch under their description for the dye. Okay, so the third color that I'm going to use is Strawberry Skies from Happy Cat, and if you have ever hit any of the dye forums out on Facebook or any of the other social media groups, you know that this is an absolutely gorgeous dye color. It has all kinds of really cool dye splits, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it shows up and how it differs on both of these shirts. I think it'll be an easy color to pick out on the shirt. The next color I'm going to use is Ice Dye Blue from Dye Spin, followed by Scottish Heather from Dye Spin, and Ice Storm from Happy Cat Tie-Dye. So basically I'm going to alternate kind of a purplish color with a blue color going around this spiral. Okay, they look pretty much the same. And at this point, I'm going to add a little additional sprinkle of soda ash over the top of the dye. And I do that just to make sure that whenever the ice melts and runs through the shirt, I still have plenty of soda ash remaining in the shirt to react with the dye. The dye has to have the soda ash to raise the pH so that the dye bonds properly with the shirt. Then I'm going to place the ice on top. I want to make sure the shirt over on the right, the one that I'm going to muck dye, is down in the muck. So I want to place enough ice on top that it's not just barely down in the muck. I want it almost fully submerged. And by the way, if you're wondering what that term muck means, that's a term for the ice that's melted and it's mixed with the dye. Once I have the ice on top, I'm going to place this container aside and allow the ice to melt. After the ice melted on the rack dyed shirt, I had some undissolved dye left on the shirt, so I went ahead and added another layer of ice to that shirt. I just left the muck dyed shirt alone. After the second layer of ice melted, I allowed the shirts to process for about 48 hours before I started rinsing them. Okay, so here's the muck dyed shirt, and you can see I had plenty of muck to cover the shirt. I dumped the muck out, and I began rinsing the shirt in cold water to rinse out the soda ash. Right now it looks like this shirt is really pretty dark. It's going to lighten up though as I continue to rinse it. And when I pull the shirt out of this container, you'll also notice that the front side is a little bit lighter than the back side. The side that was laying on the bottom of the container is darker. After I rinse well in cold water, I'm going to untie the shirt and warm the water up to hot and continue rinsing in hot water to rinse out the excess dye that didn't bond with the fabric. Okay, so now I'm going to rinse out the rack dyed shirt, and I transported it in a container just so that it wouldn't make a mess on my floor. You can already see that this shirt is not as dark as the other shirt was, but I'm going to rinse it the same way. I'm rinsing in cold water to rinse out the soda ash. I'm going to untie the shirt and warm the water up to hot and continue rinsing in hot water to rinse out any of the excess dye that didn't bond with the fabric. To get out the excess dye, I normally just soak my shirts, and I'm going to do that this time, but since both the shirts are the same color, I'm going to put them in together and soak them together. I'm going to put some really hot water in my utility sink, along with a little splash of Blue Dawn dish detergent. Then I'm going to place both the shirts in the water and allow them to soak. I came back and changed out the water when it cooled off, and I continued that soaking process until my water was remaining almost clear. Then I put both the shirts, along with some Dharma's Professional Textile Detergent, into my washing machine, and I washed them using a hot water cycle. Okay, so the shirts have been washed, dried, and ironed, and let's compare them. I'm going to start off with the rack dyed shirt. Okay, so remember how I said Strawberry Skies would be really easy to find on the shirt? So I purposely put that color on the shirt so that you could locate Strawberry Skies and figure out which other colors are on either side of it. So Strawberry Skies on this shirt is the one that is looping around and is up on, if you're looking at the shirt, it's over on the right-hand shoulder at the very top. It's kind of got a little bit of green, and it's the color on the shirt that has the most color splits, I think. The rest of the colors have some pretty color splits coming out of those too, and I like the blue and purple kind of combination, alternating those colors on the shirt. I think this shirt really pops. It's got a few light colors, darker colors, some variation in there. It's, I think, a cool looking shirt. I also really like the lighter part in the center. I think that really makes it stand out. In general, whenever I apply dye to spirals, I try not to go too heavy-handed in the center, even when I'm liquid dyeing, because I think when you do, it kind of muddies that center, especially if you're using colors like rainbow colors that don't always play nice together. Okay, so now let's move on to the Muck dyed shirt. The Strawberry Skies on this one is over on the left-hand shoulder or the left-hand portion of the shirt. It kind of goes almost right through the seam for the sleeve. And the Strawberry Skies splits really pretty on this one too. You can definitely see some of the green on it. There are some good color splits with the other colors as well. When you compare the front and the back, which was down in the very bottom of the container, is a little bit darker. Of course, you're never really going to notice that when you're wearing the shirt because nobody's going to be looking at the front of you and the back of you at the same time. One thing that's cool about a Muck dyed shirt is you'll notice the darker lines kind of radiating from the center of that spiral, and those are from the back of the shirt sitting down in the muck. Those lines are kind of thin and pretty dark and pretty defined. Okay, so let's compare the two together. When you look at them, the rack dyed shirt is over on the left like it was on the rack, and the Muck dyed shirt is over on the right. And I'm going to keep that this way throughout the entire comparison process, just to make it easier. You can definitely tell a difference between the two in my opinion. The rack dyed shirt is much lighter, it's brighter, it's got kind of white areas, quite a bit of color variation as far as intensity in the color. The Muck dyed shirt just has a much darker feel. The different bands of color are more solid. There's a little bit of white up in the top portion, but for the most part, the color's pretty solid on this shirt. Both of the shirts have pretty good color splits. I really think that the Strawberry Skies color splits show up a little bit more on the Muck dyed shirt than they do on the liquid dyed shirt. I think part of that is because that green really stands out on the Muck dyed shirt. There are lines that radiate from the center of each one of the spirals on both of the shirts. The ones on the Muck dyed shirt are darker, thinner, and more defined. The ones on the rack dyed shirt are a little bit thicker and kind of more watercolor-like. They're also not as dark. So were you surprised by this experiment? Is this what you expected to happen? This is really what I expected to happen. Generally, whenever I rack dye something, it turns out much brighter than whenever I muck dye it. And that's kind of part of the reason for muck dyeing, is to get that darker, more mysterious vibe on the shirt. Do you have a favorite? I know which one's my favorite, but I want to hear what you guys have to say. And did you enjoy the experiment? I mean, do you have any suggestions? Other things you'd like to see? I'm going to go back and redo some of the other experiments that I've done in the past. So be watching because I'm redoing the dye over the ice, both with a rack and muck dyed, and some of my other experiments. I think these are fun to do just to kind of show how when you change just a little bit of the method, it can make a huge difference on the shirt. So drop me some comments down below and let me know what you think about this experiment, about these dye colors. Like I said, if you haven't tried, especially the Strawberry Skies from Happy Cat, I would highly suggest that. And I love all these dye spin colors too. I mean, they're absolutely gorgeous. So I didn't really even talk about that, but I think that both of these shirts are super pretty. I mean, I love the purples and the blues, and I think they just look gorgeous together. But what do you guys think? Please drop me some comments down below and let me know. And if you've enjoyed the experiment, I sure would appreciate it if you would like it, and if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'll hit the bell, you'll receive a notification whenever I upload a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.